So did you get into programming quite young then, or were you more of a mathematician?
I mean, I guess I was sort of
Mm,
like I was
mm,
exposed to it pretty young. I mean, we always had a computer in the house growing up. But the funny thing is, like, I think the generation today that grows up with these, sort of slick graphical user interfaces, they're in some ways less likely to become uh, programmers at a young age
mm,
because all of the interactions with the machine at the very low level have kind of been smoothed away to make it like
mm.
easier to work with,
Right.
and that's all kind of been pushed onto programmers to make this very sleek product. And our first computer growing up was a Macintosh LC3, and even that was a fairly polished product compared to the first generation of PCs, and that was not actually where my first programming experience was. That actually came like uh, at summer camp when I stumbled across the like old Commodore 64 that was like
Ah, okay.
tucked away in the corner of the
Mm,
computer lab they had. And a lot of the counselors were concerned I wasn't getting out and playing soccer enough, or like going canoeing, that I would just sit inside and play Oregon Trail all day.
oh, sweet. Yeah.
But came across that, and it was, I mean, this was like
Mm,
1995 or six or something like this, and but this was a machine that still had saved all of its program state out to a tape cassette, so it was like pre floppy disk even.
okay. Wow.
But basically all it had was a BASIC interpreter, so like I just had to learn BASIC to do anything with it. And just once you get the idea that, oh, you don't just do something that somebody else has sort of set up for you, but that you can create new things.
Mm,
Obviously, the first thing I did was start writing games.
mm, yeah.
Don't remember exactly what they were, but it was simple stuff. Or you just write uh, 10 print hello, 20 go to 10, and
Right.
see everything blow up. That's pretty much everybody's first program.
Ah, yeah.
Um,
That's pretty cool.
but yeah, so
Mm,
that was it. It was just this sort of having this old computer where the only thing you could do was program, and having a manual sitting next to it was sort of the exposure I needed just to kind of get going.
yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of talk now about making programming sexy,
Hmm.
in a ways to try and move it away from the kind of experience that you had, which was
Yeah.
very, kind of, I guess, social, like you were by yourself and it
Hmm.
was quite clunky or, I
Yeah, it
mean,
was clunky and a little antisocial.
right, exactly. And also, I mean, you weren't programming in assembly, I guess. So it was
It wasn't
pretty
quite that
close.
low
So it
level.
was,
I mean, BASIC was
so,
designed to be easy to learn. It was meant to be sort of an
mm,
educational programming language.
yeah,
So I guess it worked in that sense.
yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, I never really had that experience. I feel like
Hmm.
that's an experience that's shared by a lot of people, and probably people
Yeah.
that you've met in your adult life have
Yeah.
also expressed.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a lot of people that go on to build tech companies and things have had
I
this
think certainly
experience.
people my age
Um,
and a little older who were exposed to like the 1980s generation
mm,
of PCs, where like pre-GUI basically, where it just drops you into a command line.
yeah,
Either it was completely uninterpretable, or you learn a few commands and start doing stuff there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think I first learned about the command line once I finished high school and did an internship as
Hmm.
a software engineer, and
Yeah.
it was quite interesting because that was my breakthrough moment where I was like, oh, this is actually what a computer is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And just this realization that everything that you can do on your computer normally you can do in the command line.
Hmm.
And in fact, the GUI is just like built on top of this quite bare bones command line structure.
It's like when you were
Um,
young, did you ever think that in your TV there were just like lots of little people running around and like
uh,
acting things out, and there were like lots of little sets, and like that was how it was working?
I don't think I did,
I
but
think I think
a
a
lot
lot
of
of people probably had this
yeah,
experience, at least from what I've heard. It's almost like that moment. It's
yeah.
like, oh, there's just like a whole bunch of stuff running around inside the computer, like doing things,
Hmm.
except it's actually real.
Yeah, I mean, there's a similar idea which I think about a lot, which comes up in physics if you study physics,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
that for any phenomenon that you ever have understood or have like some knowledge of, there's always like a level below that you could go to if you wanted to understand it more deeply.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
you have to resist the temptation because it will like distract you from the thing that you're trying to learn now. But it's also like a weird kind of connection where, if a ball falls off a table or something, or if a computer does something, then
Hmm.
fundamentally there is some explanation at a lower level for why that thing happened.
Sure, sure. Well, it's the
Mm,
the reductionist impulse. It's And some of the, I guess, like intellectual arrogance of physics comes down to this idea that like, well, we're studying the bottom of the stack of reality.
Right.
Like we're getting as low as you can go, and everything else is just an applied version of our field. But to the point where I think there have even been some sort of overblown publications recently claiming that like, oh wow, you can, how would you put it? Basically claiming that they've almost discovered the concept of high-level explanations of phenomena, which did you? I think Scott Aronson had some. I mean, he's very good at sort of throwing cold water on sort
Scott
of
Aronson's
anything.
great, I think,
yeah, anything getting kind of hyped up in sort of popular science. But I'm trying to remember exactly this one. It was claiming to be sort of a mathematical framework explaining the idea of different levels of explanation. And it's sort of like, well, you didn't really need to like invent a whole new framework to make the point that there are different levels of explanation that are useful for different things. Yeah. It's only if you spend so long at the bottom of the stack that you almost forget that there are other ways of explaining things that are completely accurate, or as accurate as you can get for that level of complexity.
Yeah.